I'm too far away. I'll sit next to you. How are you?
I was interested in what you said about population density, and you moved on, but I'm interested in how much urbanism is a precondition for really being a smart city, because Auckland, like many other cities in the world, has this argument about intensification versus sprawl. Do you have a view on that?
Oh, I definitely do.
Oh.
I believe densification is critical to achieving more sustainable and smart cities for many reasons. The more sprawled cities are, the less efficient it is to deliver types of services that can actually make a city more sustainable and smarter. In more sprawled cities, they have a harder time going from pilot to full scale because it's just too expensive to get the IoT infrastructure, whatever, spread throughout such a broad area. And in the mobility space, for me, it actually starts with density more than it does with better mobility strategy. Like, I met with several times with the director of urban planning for the city of Buenos Aires, and his argument, and I agree with it totally, he says the best urban transit solution is better densification, better urban planning. Because what you want to do is enable transit-oriented development so that you have nodes of transit near denser residential and mixed use. And you want to enable walkability and accessibility to services near where people live. And when you have sprawl, it's almost impossible to have enough density to warrant having the transit nodes that are required and the services around it, so that people, what you want to do is eliminate the dependence on a car or even mobility. The best mobility is not needing it, because everything you need is within walking distance of where you are, and that's impossible to achieve in a sprawled city.
And that's interesting, because that's a good example of a choice that you make for 20 years' time. You know, there are choices about where you put your public transit routes, about where you put the housing on those routes. And everyone has to do that, don't they?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of working with Vancouver over several years as I lived in Vancouver, Canada. And they are world class in thinking about transit-oriented development. And what they did was, when they started envisioning the need to expand transit through, they have a sort of a SkyTrain, they call it, which is an elevated light rail, basically, or elevated metro. And they actually did a lot of planning. Of course, they had a lot of NIMBYs, not my backyard, I don't want density in my area, and they had to deal with that. But in the end, what they did was they rezoned areas that were within certain distances from planned transit nodes. The property value in those areas skyrocketed, so the owners of the houses were more willing to leave them, because the property value doubled, because the zoning allowed for more density, the value of that land increased a lot. And so what you found in Vancouver is that you have these, it's so visible when you go on the SkyTrain, because it's elevated so you can see everything. As you're on it, as you get close to the next stop, you see this growing density around it, and it just makes so much logical sense, because people feel that, oh, if I live that close to a transit node, then I don't even need to rely on a car. And they actually started working in Vancouver. They eliminated, they used to have a minimum car allotment in multifamily residential that was like 1.2 for every X square meters, and they eliminated it. So they actually started seeing some buildings, residential mixed-use buildings, where they had zero underground parking. I don't believe that. I don't have a driver's license, by the way, so I can believe it. I've lived that lifestyle.
Matt, you'll be familiar with some of those things like zero parking. These are already controversial. What are the problems that Auckland needs to solve?
Well, I think you've suggested it right there. Transport is one of those key ones. Housing shortage is another one. We have a massive inequality when it comes to availability of land, but food pricing is another, which plays into some of the things that we're talking around here. And things like water quality. So not only do we ensure those things are provided, but then also how do we optimize those systems in a way that makes sense for a more equal distribution of people?
Does that mean we start doing our systems differently? I mean, I heard earlier on in the year, heard a briefing from Auckland Transport, which did, to me, kind of signal a move away from the traditional corporate or local government IT kinds of structures. looking at smaller projects, being more agile, small a agile. Is that what's going to happen?
I think it's inevitable to a certain extent. You know, most of the centralisation that's happened over the last 30, 40 years has been driven by technology which allows efficiency, but we're looking at technology now which allows effectiveness. It will still have a role for government in that space and how we regulate and how we maintain those systems. But our focus changes one from processing, which we currently do a lot of manual work around now, to one which is more around optimizing. So I think the two will fit more neatly in together with each other.
It is going to be pretty hard to shift local government away from its fondness for big providers, isn't it? You know, in procurement, it's always a nice idea that you can go with someone big and it's all going to work out.
I think that was been the default choice out of resource constraints. I think, you know, if you speak to individuals, people want to be able to have a more distributed ecosystem of providers, and having ways in which and technologies which can ensure that kind of competitive landscape, I think will be welcomed by all. I don't think we will have a problem with that, but it's just how we can use this technology to make those people's jobs easier and help provide those opportunities more widely.
In what terms are you thinking about blockchain at the moment?
We've got a number of different opportunities we're looking at the moment. We've got a drones program which we're looking at, which we will need blockchain-like technology to be able to identify and manage drones operating around the city. We're looking at physical infrastructure as a service and how blockchain can do micropayments around logistics, mobility, those types of service models. There's a whole load of opportunity around e-voting. We are going to be one of the first cities that allows e-voting, so the identity issue crops up there quite largely. And then there's a whole load of stuff around just typical records and archiving. So there's a fantastic lot of opportunities, and I think somebody mentioned it earlier about trying to keep people here rather than going abroad. And I think what we're trying to do at the council at the moment is articulate and surface those opportunities quickly enough to make sure people can stay here.
Which was the mayor's campaign promise, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Marianne, most of the talk about smart cities is founded in large cities and even mega cities. How does the concept play out in the regional centre, and where does blockchain fit in?
I think it's pretty much the same. It's a scalable idea. So the framework that Wanganui uses is the Intelligent Communities Forum framework, and it's got 6 indicators that any city can use. So Wanganui was named the top intelligent community in the world this year for, with a population of under 50,000. So we're pretty excited about that. That was based on some data that they collected, or that we provided them with actually, over 5 years. And so, you know, we use those 6 indicators that the Intelligent Community Forum sets out, but so do massive cities like Montreal, Melbourne, Espoo, Finland won this year. So, you know, so big cities can do it as well. It's just a matter of applying this framework, you know, looking at these indicators, seeing where the gaps are, and then looking at where you need to apply your resources. And in terms of blockchain, one of the things that we're interested in at the moment is an online marketplace for goods, so for things that we make in Wanganui. So, for example, all the people out there that go to Waiheke are sailing over there in a boat that we made in Wanganui. Or the New York Fire Department and the London Ambulance Services are wearing helmets that we made in Wanganui. So we've got quite a diverse economy and lots of different things. We've got glass blowers sending lights to New York.
Right, because there are some pretty compelling blockchain use cases in the primary sector. So I imagine that's one of the ways that the uptake of blockchain might look different in the regional centre surrounded by farmland.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I think that gate-to-plate thing is a great example, but also I think something that maybe doesn't come across much is that the regions are the same. We just want the same things as the cities, right? We're just smaller. We still want the same things. Like, we had people saying to us, oh, why do you want fibre? What are you going to do with it? And we're like, we're going to watch Netflix, mate, you know? We're going to do all the things that you guys want to do, eh? You know? So it's just the same. We're just smaller. Smaller, but cute.
Andy, you're already reaching out and talking to city authorities around the world. What are the questions they're asking you? What do they want to know? What do they want to be reassured about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I started my smart city journey inside the Auckland Council machine. So got some insight there. I mean, there is an inbuilt allergicness to risk, and you know, in some ways, you know, many people's first priority is self-preservation, and so, you know, the status quo is safe. So they want to be reassured, I think is the first point. The second point is, you know, when we were doing our research, looking around the world at what is the platform for innovation, it's open data. And, you know, we haven't got there yet in Auckland, and there's a reason. You know, open data does not exist on proprietary software. You know, someone's in control of that data, and it ain't us. So what you need is open source software, which is, you know, owned by the community, or, you know, developed by the community, for the community, and then you get true open data. And, you know, that's the journey we're on. And it's projects like Boyd's, and this is the sophistication that's emerging, that is developing the data protocols which allow this collaboration en masse. Because when the data scientists come together to try and create this warehouse of open data, it's like spaghetti, nothing connects. So I like to say we've got to turn that spaghetti into lasagna, so it lines up.
Yeah, right, yes, like that. That again does imply a change of philosophy in the way cities do their IT systems in particular, and how they do procurement. How's that going to happen?
Yeah, well, I like procurement is an enemy of innovation. It really is. And, you know, what generally happens is that cities...
I still want that on a T-shirt.
Yeah. But, you know, the innovation happens at startups. People are hungry and need to innovate. And then, you know, no one ever got fired for hiring a big multinational conglomerate. And I think we need a mindset shift. And I think that's what we're seeing. You know, cities are going broke around the world. It's no different here. And so they don't actually have the budget. The budget's there to keep the lights on. And what we're seeing, and it's really encouraging, you know, guys like Matt, who's head of innovation here in Auckland, is having these workshops with how do we co-create the new solutions with industry. And that's the new approach. And that's one of the reasons we partnered with Lightning Lab in Wellington. Now, I don't know how many people know that, you know, Creative HQ, who run the Lightning Lab Accelerator program, is owned by the Wellington Regional Economic Development Authority, REDA. So it's one of the most successful businesses that's been incubated inside, you know, local government, and we should be really proud of that. They've run 20 accelerators now, and we're really passionate about that approach, from starting with the problem statement and then developing solutions in a really structured way to an MVP, and then fail or build on top of that. And I think, you know, what we need is the big multinationals to partner up with the local ecosystem to then build the solutions of the future, which hopefully blockchain allows.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Procurement is the enemy of innovation, except when it's procurement for innovation. And procurement for innovation is a concept that has emerged in smart cities around the world, where you allocate a percentage of your budget, and it's actually legitimate. This is happening, where they'll say up to, say, 5%. Some communities have done this. Up to 5% of their annual budget is allocated in a separate pot called procurement for innovation. And with that budget, they can actually procure in a different way. They don't have to follow the traditional procurement standards or necessarily achieve the same kind of preferred success of the project, so they can fail with that 5%, and they basically educate the marketplace and the community about why they're doing this, and it enables that co-creation discussion I talked about and Phil just mentioned as well. So what you see there, like one example I like to use is the idea of, like, if a city council says, you know what, we want to see the acceleration, the adoption of electric vehicles in our city. All right, we have $1 million to do that. So in a normal procurement world, they might come up with the idea, you know what, and this has happened in many cities around the world, all right, we're going to acquire $1 million worth of electric vehicles for our municipal fleet. And therefore, our own city staff will have experience with those vehicles, and population will see it, and hopefully that increases adoption. So that would be the normal procurement model, and then the city would actually go through all these specifications around what they expect of the provider of these vehicles and the maintenance of them and everything else. But if you go procurement for innovation, you say, all right, we're going to take that same $1 million, and instead of saying we're going to predetermine the specifications of the vehicles we're going to buy, you say as a city, we have $1 million, we want to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. Come at us. Could be big companies, could be startups, could be local residents. Tell us what you got. How could we best do it? And you might get somebody saying, all right, we have this idea to create a whole infrastructure of electric charging, and because electric charging stations, the lack of them is the biggest barrier to people adopting them. Another one might say we have the subsidy idea for making it more affordable to buy the cars. Another one would say we want to do a pilot of electric vehicle car sharing because that would allow more and more residents to have experience with it. Well, now you have a smorgasbord of potential options to achieve the original city goal, which is accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, but instead of being sort of squared and tunnel vision on what you think as a city staff is the best way, you've let the world and your local residents and others collaborate with innovative ideas, and then you choose the best one. And sometimes they actually do the next step and say, we as a council aren't going to decide, we're going to put it to a vote and let residents decide which one is the best way. So there are ways to sort of turn procurement on its head and allow it to be a contributor or an enabler of innovation.
That's what we in New Zealand call a contestable fund. What do you make of that, Matt?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and we're lucky enough in Auckland to have a council that's willing to change now. I think it's all a perception thing. It's a perception of risk. The converse of risk is actually true in most circumstances. We have these huge, complex and uncertain systems now, which we try and reduce uncertainty by going through procurement processes that allow us to be able to understand what the outcome is going to be. But actually in this context, doing those small, agile, iterative sorts of approaches is the best way of managing risk. Mm-hmm. So it just comes back down to a mindset thing about how you get people to understand that and then enable procurement that can help facilitate that. And I think we're very close to actually cracking that problem here in Auckland, which is very positive.
Viv, you're not an IT person or a systems person, but you represent people with a big stake in the central city. I'm guessing that you see people as a really important part of this. How does that play out?
Absolutely. Actually, what's so fabulous to be here today is there are so many common themes rolling through all of this. I mean, what we see is a fascinating period of change in the city centre. There's physical development. I mean, you can just see cones on every corner. And yes, we do have new developments that are focused on showers and end of ride facilities rather than car parks. I mean, it's absolutely happening. Massive social change, economic, environmental change. It's a really interesting time. People are at the core of it. And with growth, with a changing makeup of the population and that level of change, obviously people are looking for different things. And I think if I can just touch on four quick things. From our perspective, it's first of all about having a place people want to come to. So the world over, people want to come into a place they enjoy being in, events, dining, hospitality, all those sorts of things, arts and culture. So what we're seeing, though, is the sorts of things we're hearing about today, the interest in sharing, the interest in the experience from the online to the bricks and mortars where you go to buy the things you love, see the things you enjoy and be with other people. So there's quite a strong theme through that aspect of it, what you actually come into a city for, making sure it's a beautiful place. And that's about the beautiful Mihi this morning that talked about making it really building on those special qualities. That's a really important part of building a city that people want to be in. And so that's another strand of our work. The third one is really about the accessibility, and I must admit that app where you can bring that, because we think about, you see all the stories about having to drive to your train and the park and rides and things. I mean, just imagine being able to bring that public and private sector, because the reality is it is a change period where not everybody has access to public transport, but for the first time since the 1950s, we've got more people coming in by public transport than private vehicle. Unbelievable change. And then the last one is really about making sure it's a welcoming, clean, safe community. A place that increasingly people feel a sense of community. We've heard that theme through today. And if I can just use one example that I think you said, it doesn't have to be a tech one, but I think there's, with the homeless, we've seen the best example of public, private, not-for-profit working together to find a solution for homelessness in the city. It's a work in progress, but it's absolutely working, and the core of it was an internationally proven model that actually worked at what worked for those people. What were the needs? How do we make it local?
We're talking about the homeless count, which was quite an extraordinary exercise. Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is the organisations behind that, particularly LifeWise, have succeeded through including their clients in what they do.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And Boyd, I wonder whether you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, in terms of target populations being involved in the co-design of a solution to their challenges, yeah, I think that's critical. That's what the 3.0 is about, is the Smart Cities 3.0 is saying the affected people or the residents who have a concern or interest in an area should actually be involved in identifying the problem to actually co-creating the solution. In some cities, like in Bologna, Italy, they've gone even so far as to say, why should the city council exclusively have the purview of redefining regulation? Why can't citizens be involved in new regulations? For example, in Bologna and Barcelona and many other cities, they're trying to figure out how they want to regulate the sharing economy in a way that's actually productive. So, I'm a pro-tech guy, so you'd think I would be anti-regulation, but I'm not. I mean, we need some regulation. Otherwise, you have some monopoly-type companies coming in with their sharing economy or gig economy solutions that really exploit local people, right? And the problem is city councils cannot always be expected to be like on the leading edge of every innovation and be able to predict it and have regulation in place before these new innovations come. So they have to react. And sometimes, the wisdom of the crowd could be better than the 8 people inside the city council responsible for figuring out new regulations. So I think the whole way of managing, regulating, and encouraging a more sustainable, improved quality of life in a city is increasingly in our day and age, and blockchain helps enable that, becoming more decentralized, and smart cities are starting to realize that they can achieve a lot more by tapping into the innovative capability. Even like you talk about disadvantaged people, one city who never did 1.0 or 2.0 on the smart city journey and only did 3.0 was Medellin in Colombia. And Medellin did this very thing you're talking about, which was they said, you know what, many cities look to innovate and they hope the trickle-down works. So we're going to innovate in areas where we can grow the economy and then hopefully the lower income people will benefit from it. They said, no, we're going to go to the poorest neighborhoods of the whole city and we're going to sit down with them and ask them what are their concerns, what are their dreams and hopes, and what if we co-create with them better solutions. And by doing so, we raise the whole city from the bottom up. And so that's a good example of going right after disadvantaged people and getting them to be part of the process. Now they have, for example, in one of the poorest neighborhoods, it might not be anymore now, but was one of the poorest neighborhoods in all of Colombia, they have the best library in the whole country. And now rich people from the other parts of the city actually travel to this very poor neighborhood with great transit now because they co-created with the locals.
Yes, so Russell, core business for council is participation in local democracy. In Auckland, the voter turnout was 27% in the last election, so it's very low. So one of the key problems they're trying to solve at the GovTech Accelerator in Wellington is youth engagement and this, social inclusion argument. So I think it's really exciting, Matt putting it out there that they're going to look at e-voting and what that could lead to in terms of community engagement. And with blockchain, you can add an incentive model. So, incentive for providing feedback to council, ideas it's about community building.
It seems evident there needs to be, that these aren't simply technical or financial decisions. There needs to be a social layer to everything you do. Yeah.
I just want to say about that as well. In fact, about all of this, for me, it's about preparing. I can't remember who it was, but someone today was saying, you think that young people think that everything's under control, and then you get a bit older, and then you're like, oh no, it's a shambles. And so for me, I was really alarmed when I realised what a shambles it was, and how councils don't really know, they don't even talk to, and I worked in a council for a long time, or a few councils. Different departments don't talk to each other. Different ministries in the government aren't talking to each other. They're not talking to their local councils. No one's talking to each other. Nobody knows what anyone's doing. Everybody's doing the same work in different departments, and it's just such a waste of resources and time and opportunity to innovate and do better. And the thing that I just had this kind of revelation recently where, because I always thought someone else was in charge of that. I was like, yeah, there's people in charge and they're doing the thing and, it's all under control. Yeah, but I've just realised recently that it's me. I'm the one in charge, and it's you. And it's you. You know, like, you're the ones in charge as well. Like, we're the ones that's us. We're the adults now. And we have to take control and prepare. And I think, yeah, it's a great opportunity for us to just do that, to say, okay, what do we don't want people not to have access to digital technology because they're too poor. You know, like, we want everybody to have that opportunity. And what does that mean for us in terms of attracting talent? Maybe the talent's already here. Like, let's grab onto that and pull it all in. And the open data, you know, that you guys were talking about as well. You know, like, don't question, oh, what data do they want from the council? Or what should we release? Let's release all of it. It's all our information. Release all of it. Let us decide.
I think you've just found your executive director for the Blockchain Cities Alliance, Boyd.
Sounds like something Penny Bright.
You're
I do want to get to Matt. We're talking about change. I have lots of friends who are very enthused with the new urbanism, but we're already finding out that there's a substantial part of the community in Auckland that does not want that change or is scared of it. I was accused of being part of a UN conspiracy this year because I wanted a bike lane. I'm not joking. How does council deal with that, and how does the council persuade people?
It comes back to a lot of what you're just saying there, which is around openness, transparency, and trust. You know, once we can demonstrate that we are able to do things properly, and we can see and have visibility of what's going on and those areas we need to focus on, and we can provide people trust that we can manage things responsibly, we're in a much better position to then actually start moving this forward. There was a discussion earlier on about whether or not council's the best place to maintain that trust, and quite possibly not. So it's these sorts of technologies that allow us to be able to collectivise some of this action and make sure that it remains transparent, and we get that permission and that social license to do things.
I wonder if one key to it is people do often see systems as making them, you know, diminishing their importance as individuals or citizens. I wonder whether the pitch should be, this will make you more of a citizen, not less of a citizen.
I think that's probably right. Active participation is something we want to encourage. Of course, there is always the risk as well that the wisdom of the crowd isn't always right. You know, people are open to persuasion as much as anything else. And what we've seen with Cambridge Analytica and some of the big major votes over the last couple of years is that people can be swayed easily. So trying to make a more open and learning and progressive society through transparent data and the use of different technologies is key to that.
And that voted for Trump were flawed in some way? Are you?
I don't know. Are you?
The other thing that makes a city is its cultures, and and its creative work. That has to be part of it too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and that was the just picking up on that earlier point, that those are the things that create that richness, and it's a place that people want to be and feel part of. And obviously we know that, the world over, people do come in for arts and cultural experiences. We also need to be mindful of the diversity of the population that's changing significantly. And I absolutely agree that it's about putting the citizen, in quotes, at the heart of it. And I think that's one of the issues when you talk about the solution looking for a problem. What I see a lot of is that it's actually been, in many ways, that same thing. So what we've got to do is recognise that we've got diverse people, they've got changing needs, and we've got to work. I think the secret of that housing solution was there was a clear goal, there was a commitment and a collaborative approach to it. It absolutely focused on the needs of the people involved. It personalised it to the local environment, and it set out about achieving it. It's unbelievably successful.
Yeah, okay, we've got 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the last question of Andy. I thought this was going to be a more technical discussion, and it's interesting what we have talked about. This is kind of a change in the game for people like you, isn't it? You're not just delivering a solution here. You actually need to work out how it fits socially.
Yeah,
And you've got
absolutely,
15 seconds.
Russell, and 12 seconds. So the final thought is that we're actually not using, it's not about blockchain. What we're trying to do here is build a data cooperative with people at the heart.
Lovely. People at the heart. Thank you very much. Cheers. Please thank our panel.